In the world of asset management, there is a golden rule. Never buy an asset that loses 50% of its value the moment you take ownership. Yet, that is exactly the financial trap you walk into every time you buy a diamond. We are taught that the high price comes from scarcity. But geologically, diamonds are just pressurized carbon, almost as common as the graphite in a pencil. The reason you have to work 3 months to buy one isn't because nature made them rare. It's because a single family decided to lock the vault. The entire market is built on a check for £5,338,650, signed in 1889. Money used to buy silence, not value. Today, we are going to deconstruct the Rothschild blueprint behind this artificial scarcity and show you why this same trap is now being set for the energy assets in your own portfolio. Welcome to the truth about artificial scarcity. To understand the modern trap, we must rewind the clock to 1870. The location: Kimberley, South Africa. History books call this the Diamond Rush. But to the banking elites in London and Paris, this wasn't an opportunity. It was a nightmare. Why? Because diamonds are not rare. That is the secret they fear most. When the massive open pits were discovered in Kimberley, the supply of diamonds exploded. Thousands of prospectors flooded the region. Diamonds were flooding the market. Stones that were once exclusive to kings and queens were suddenly being sold by dirty smugglers for pennies. Basic economics started to take effect. Supply skyrocketed. Demand stayed the same. The value was about to collapse. If this continued, diamonds would become as common as semi-precious quartz. They would lose their aristocratic allure, and most importantly, they would cease to be a vehicle for transferring wealth. In the middle of this chaos, a figure emerged. Cecil Rhodes, a sickly young Englishman who came to Africa for his health but stayed for an empire. Rhodes looked at the desperate miners digging for scraps, and he laughed. He understood a fundamental truth. Power isn't in owning the shovel. Power is in owning the gate. But Rhodes, for all his ambition, was just the executioner. He needed capital. He needed a war chest to execute an insane plan, to buy every single diamond mine in South Africa and shut them down. Who had the financial firepower to fund a continental monopoly in the 19th century? Not the local banks. There was only one network with the vision to see beyond borders: the House of Rothschild. Historical records confirm that while Rhodes was the face of De Beers, the Rothschild, specifically the French and London branches, were the largest investors. They didn't just invest in mining. They invested in control. It was the classic partnership. Cecil Rhodes was the iron fist on the ground. The Rothschilds were the invisible hand in London. But there was an obstacle: Barney Barnato. Barnato was Rhodes's biggest rival, a street-smart Londoner who rose from poverty to own the most productive claims in the Kimberley mine. If Barnato continued to mine and sell freely, the plan for a monopoly would fail. A brutal financial war began. Rhodes, backed by the bottomless pockets of the French Rothschild bankers, began to squeeze Barnato. It was a hostile takeover before the term even existed. Rhodes didn't want competition. He wanted total domination. Finally, in 1889, the pressure broke the dam. Barnato surrendered, and this is the moment that redefined the global jewelry market forever. Cecil Rhodes sat down and signed that historic check for over £5 million to buy out his rival. The moment that check cleared, the free market died. De Beers Consolidated Mines was born. They instantly controlled practically the entire diamond output of South Africa, which at that time meant they controlled the world. From that second on, the price of a diamond was no longer determined by buyers and sellers. It was determined by a group of men sitting in a boardroom. They had created what we call artificial scarcity. And that was only the first step of the trap. Because owning the mine wasn't enough. They needed to own your mind. So, by 1889, they had the monopoly. They had the mines. They had the physical control. But they faced a problem that brute force couldn't solve. You can corner the market on wheat because people need to eat. You can corner the market on oil because people need to drive. But nobody needs a diamond. It is a shiny, useless rock. And in the 1930s, as the Great Depression crushed the global economy, the public woke up to this reality. Diamond prices collapsed. The De Beers cartel was sitting on a mountain of stones that nobody wanted. This is where the genius of the Rothschild investment strategy revealed itself. They understood that if you can't force the market physically, you must force it psychologically. They didn't need miners anymore. They needed manipulators. In 1938, De Beers sent a distress signal to New York City. They hired the advertising agency N.W. Ayer and Son. Their mission was impossible. Convince a generation of struggling men that they were failures if they didn't spend their limited savings on a De Beers stone. This was not marketing. This was psychological warfare. N.W. Ayer didn't just run ads. They infiltrated Hollywood. They paid movie studios to insert engagement scenes into scripts. They paid fashion designers to model diamonds on the runway. And then, in 1947, a copywriter named Francis Goretti scribbled 4 words on a piece of paper that would become the most profitable lie in history. A diamond is forever. Think about that phrase. It does 2 things instantly. First, it links the stone to eternal love. If you sell the stone, you are selling your love. It traps you into holding the asset forever, ensuring you never flood the market with second-hand goods. Second, it implies the stone holds its value forever. It does not. But the masterstroke wasn't the slogan. It was the salary rule. You've heard it. You should spend 2 months' salary on the ring. Do you think that rule came from ancient tradition? Do you think it came from the church? No. It came from a boardroom meeting. Initially, the agency suggested 1 month's salary. When that worked, they pushed it to 2 months in America. When they entered the Japanese market in the 1970s, they boldly demanded 3 months' salary. They literally set a tax rate on your romantic life. And because they held the monopoly, you had no choice but to pay their price. So, where did all that money go? When you worked those 3 months, sweating in a factory or an office, and handed that cash to the jeweler, where did it end up? It didn't stay in the jewelry store. It flowed upstream, back to the cartel, back to De Beers. And here is the dark truth about what your engagement ring actually funded. Cecil Rhodes and his backers didn't use that wealth to build schools or hospitals. They used it to build a private army. De Beers wasn't just a company. It was a state within a state. They used company profits to equip private troops with Maxim machine guns. They used the money to invade territories north of the Limpopo River. The cartel didn't view the Ndebele people as enemies. They viewed them as overhead costs. The invasion wasn't just a war. It was a hostile corporate takeover enforced by Maxim machine guns to secure the lowest possible labor cost. They were so powerful, they literally named a country after themselves. Rhodesia. Think about the absurdity of this cycle. The public in Europe and America was conditioned into working harder to buy a rock. That money was funneled to South Africa to fund a private war machine that conquered land for the British Empire. You weren't buying a symbol of love. You were funding the gunpowder for the age of imperialism. And the ultimate punchline? The asset you bought is a financial trap. De Beers knew that if the public ever tried to resell their diamonds, the market would crash. So they engineered the forever concept to guilt you into never selling. They created a roach motel for capital. Money checks in, but it never checks out. But today, the De Beers monopoly has fractured. The mines are no longer solely theirs. Does that mean the game is over? No. The game has just moved to a new board. The players who learned from Rhodes and Rothschild have moved on from shiny rocks. They have realized that the next artificial scarcity isn't about luxury. It's about necessity. They are no longer just targeting your finger. They are targeting your house, your car, and the technology in your pocket. They moved from luxury to necessity. From what you want to what you need. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. The De Beers monopoly eventually fractured. The diamond market today is not the absolute fortress it was in 1889. But do not make the mistake of thinking the Rothschild playbook retired with Cecil Rhodes. It didn't. It just migrated. The architects of this system realized that controlling a luxury item like diamonds has limits. Not everyone buys jewelry, but everyone needs energy. Everyone needs technology. So, where is the artificial scarcity today? Look at the portfolio. While you were distracted by the sparkle of diamonds, the same financial networks quietly secured the rights to the nervous system of the 21st century. We are talking about copper, lithium, rare earth minerals. The De Beers model has been copy-pasted onto the green energy revolution. Consider Rio Tinto. This is one of the largest mining corporations on Earth. It digs up the materials required for every smartphone, every electric vehicle, and every solar panel. And who has historically stood behind Rio Tinto? The Rothschilds. The family has held substantial stakes in both De Beers and Rio Tinto for generations. They understood early on that as the world moved away from coal and oil, it would move toward minerals. The mechanism is identical to the diamond trap. But the marketing is different. In 1947, they told you, you must buy a diamond to prove your love. Today, the narrative is, you must buy green technology to save the planet. The psychological pressure has shifted from romance to moral duty. But the economics remain the same. They control the mines. They restrict the supply through environmental regulations that prevent new competitors from entering the market. And then, they wait for the demand to explode as governments mandate the transition to electric power. It is the perfect squeeze. You are walking into a future where the physical assets required for your daily life are owned by a monopoly that you cannot see, paying prices that are artificially inflated, just like that diamond on your finger. Don't believe me? Let's look at the scoreboard. Let's compare real money against the marketing illusion. Look at this chart. As you can see, gold, the asset they hold in their central banks, has broken all-time highs. It retains value. It protects wealth. Now look at diamonds. Despite a century of marketing, despite the monopoly, the resale value is pathetic. It is a depreciating asset. This is the final proof. They convinced the middle class to store their wealth in shiny rocks and paper currency, both of which lose value over time. Meanwhile, they stored their wealth in gold, land, and the mining rights to the future. The story of Cecil Rhodes, the Rothschilds, and De Beers is not just a history lesson. It is a warning. It teaches us that value is perception, and perception can be engineered. They took a common stone and made it priceless. They took a barren piece of land in Africa and made it an empire. And they took your labor and turned it into their legacy. The trap that was set in 1889 is still active. The only difference is that today, The cage is digital, and the diamonds are the rare earth minerals in the phone you are holding right now. So, I leave you with this question. Was Cecil Rhodes a genius of industry? Or was he the frontman for the greatest wealth transfer in human history? Is the scarcity of the resources we fight over real? Or is it just another vault, locked by another family, waiting for you to pay the compliance tax? The cycle of resource control is complete. But the cycle of war is just beginning. Because once you control the resources, you have to defend them. And that costs blood. In the next episode, we will expose the second pillar of the Rothschild empire, the war machine. We will investigate how they funded both sides of Napoleon's wars, and why modern conflicts are just a continuation of that business model. Protect your assets, question the narrative, and never pay 3 months' salary for an illusion.